Hi there, my name is Toby, and on this channel I talk about the force. I talk about the chi energy, the ether, or the life force energy. Or as I said, the force, quite literally the force in Star Wars, the force of the Jedi. It's all the same thing. Now this may seem fantastical, but it's actually very, very serious. This is a science, it's a philosophy, it's a real science. It's a science that will also lead to technology, new technology, and in fact it's not even new technology, it's ancient technology. This is ancient knowledge, ancient wisdom, it's metaphysics. And the problem is modern science has dismissed metaphysics, but really you cannot dismiss the soul spirit, you cannot dismiss consciousness from your science. You must include metaphysics. So this science of ether, this ether physics, is a holistic science. I can talk about it in all different ways. I talk about it in the body for exercises, because you've got to feel the force. It's a real thing that we can experience. I talk about it spiritually in terms of internal experiences of your soul spirit, personal experiences, and I talk about it, like I said, philosophically and scientifically, which I'm doing today. And today I want to talk about it in terms of one single force. There is only one force. There's only one force in the universe. It works like this. The universe is comprised of one thing. Only one thing. That thing is ether. Pure fluid field. It's a metaphysical field, a field of consciousness, living energy. It's a field of feelings. Feelings are metaphysics. It's a field of mathematics. Mathematics is metaphysics, it's not physical. Imagination. All of this stuff is in the ether. It's infinite possibilities. Infinite potential. It's also, we can also call this inertia. Ether is inertia. In science, inertia means rest, a point of stillness, nothingness. But in the ancient philosophies, inertia means infinite potentiality. Potential energy. Not quite energy, but potential energy. Infinite potential energy. Very important. Now, infinite potential energy, you can't pin it down. You can't say what that is. It's metaphysical. It's possibilities. But nevertheless, it is real. It has to be real because there is this universe. We are conscious and we have this stuff. Everything is going on. Where does it come from? It has to come from somewhere. So we're making an assumption. Let's call it an assumption, but it's a very simple assumption. The universe is made of one thing, one pure fluid field of ether. And from this field of ether comes energy. From infinite potential energy appears energy, finite potential energy, or finite energy. And this energy, what does it do? Well, this energy has a force. Well, what does the force do? Well, the force is acting upon the energy to return it back to inertia. Look at it like this. The ether is balanced, pure infinite potential balance, stationary, stillness. But the ether is moving inside itself, interacting with itself. And the interactions of this ether with itself create these disturbances. And these disturbances are like limited potentials of energy. They appear and they disappear. Remember, it's got to be balanced. Energy appears, but it must disappear back again for the balance to be maintained. So energy is created, but in order for the balance to be maintained, it must be destroyed again. So energy is created, and the force of this energy wanting to return back to inertia is the one and only force in the universe. Very, very interesting. Very simple idea, but you can build the whole model of the universe from this idea. It's a far more powerful idea than modern science. Modern science has dismissed this. But let me try and explain it to you. From this pure fluid field of ether, consciousness, feelings, mathematics, imagination, from this there's a disturbance. From the stillness there is a disturbance. What is that disturbance? That disturbance is desire. Desire is created inside consciousness. Desire starts the ether moving, movement happens. So already desire is an energy, something is happening, but it's still metaphysics. It's still just in the ether. It's feelings. But if that desire is concentrated, the disturbance becomes more powerful, more localized. Then from that, more energy can create. Another energy is created, and that we can call electricity. Or to be specific, electrostatics, an electric charge, a potential, a limited potential of energy. So you can call the ether infinite potential energy, infinite capacitance, if we want to talk about electricity. Infinite capacitance is the ether, but from the infinite capacitance, a finite capacitance is created. A disturbance, so something happens, it disturbs, a finite energy is created, but that immediately wants to go back, disappear again. And from that finite capacitance, that electrostatic charge, there is a force, and that force is magnetism. So electricity or electrostatics is always created with magnetism. These two things come together. In fact, they're the same thing, two sides of the same coin. You can think of electricity or electrostatics, dielectricity, static electricity as the creation of energy from the ether. And then magnetism is that energy pulling back to disappear back into the ether. Again, you remember, it's all balanced. It must be balanced. If there's something is created, it must be destroyed. For the totality of the ether is rest, emptiness. But in that rest, in that emptiness, is infinite potential energy. Or from the ether, there is desire. Desire intensifies until a potential is created. Electricity, electrostatics. Quite literally, you can think of a thunderstorm. The ether is like the weather. High pressure and low pressure everywhere. And these high pressures and low pressures are moving about, creating different effects. Movement of the wind. And in the clouds, they build up the energy. Energy builds up in the clouds. That's like desire building up in the ether. But so much energy, desire builds up in the clouds, builds up until suddenly a spark is created. So one location, the energy builds up, and then from there a spark is created, electricity. And that's what lightning is. A spark is created, it goes off. But where does it go to? It goes off somewhere, it goes off again, it's trying to get back. It's trying to go back to inertia. So it'll go off from a high point of high pressure is created, high pressure, so high pressure, energy is created, it goes off and it looks for a point of low pressure. It travels off till it goes to low pressure and disappears again. So that's what lightning is. It builds up in high pressure, high electrical pressure, and then it releases down to earth, or it releases in different places, all over the place. Anywhere there's low pressure, low electrical pressure, it will go to there. So you can think of electricity as fluid, a fluid that moves from high pressure to low pressure, but it's an electrical fluid. It's different. It's not quite exactly fluid. It's not like water, because water is ultimately still particles. This is pure fluid, very different. But it's all still ether. Everything is ether. The ether is moving, disturbing. And in some places in the disturbance intensifies. Now you've got desire. It intensifies. Now you've got energy, electricity. And this is interesting because desire is still subjective. It's in the ether, soul, spirit, feelings. But once it intensifies to the level where it becomes electricity, an actual potential, now it's objective. Now we can all see it. We can all observe electricity, electrostatics. We can measure it. And the same with magnetism. We can observe it. We can measure it. So with electrostatics, magnetism comes together. So we have now electromagnetism. But electromagnetism is still ether. It's simply a disturbance of the ether. The ether is moving. As it moves in different ways, electricity and magnetism, this is the movement of the ether. And energy comes from this movement, these vibrations, these pulsations. That's energy. Energy is the movement of the ether. But as the ether moves, it does something, balance must be maintained. Remember, the force must be balanced. So if some movement happens, it must spring back. It must go back again. So that's where you need both electricity and magnetism. These are the two things. Another way you can look at it is this. Electricity is energy. Energy is created from the ether, springs forth from a point, and then magnetism is the force that pulls it back. Magnetism is entropy. Entropy is the process of energy returning back to inertia, going back to rest, to stillness. From the rest, energy emerges, and then it goes back into rest. So that's how the ether works. That's what's going on in the universe. So that so far explains consciousness and explains electromagnetism. But how do we explain material reality? That is also in the universe. This must also be ether. Everything is ether. So what's going on with material reality? How do we get this? Well, from the ether, desire builds up. Desire builds up, and then becomes intense. And from there we have electricity, or electrostatics, dielectricity, potential of energy, limited potential, a limited capacitance. And then from there is magnetism. But remember, magnetism and electricity now work together. They're vibrating. So from a point of inertia, energy can come out. And it will go out. Where does it go? Well, it goes out off to infinity. It's trying to find inertia again. So from a point, energy comes out. It's trying to disappear. It's disappear. But what happens is different frequencies of this energy coming out. And at a very high frequency, it's a very powerful disturbance of the ether. Let's build it up. A soft, gentle disturbance moves into desire. That's becoming a more powerful disturbance. Desire intensifies, more powerful disturbance. And that becomes electricity. Once electricity is created, now you have magnetism. It has to, because it's got to come back again. That's all it is. But then now you've got that very powerful disturbance creating electromagnetism, even more powerful, faster and faster frequency. At a particular frequency, the electromagnetism will loop back on itself. So from a point of inertia, from the ether, energy is created, but it's created at such a high frequency, it's like it comes out, and it's going to go off, but it comes out so fast, it loops back. And it comes out from its own point of inertia. Here's a point of nothingness. Energy comes out, it usually just goes off. But it comes out so fast that it senses its own point where it comes from, and it starts to go round it. So it's pulled back in to its own point. But it's pulled at a certain frequency that it just goes round and round and round it. It becomes a self-sustaining wave, like an orbit. See, an orbit is a particular frequency around a planet. It goes round and round and round. At the right frequency, it's stuck. It's locked into that orbit. If you change the frequency, the orbit collapses, goes into the middle, and it will disappear. If the frequency is different, again, it will go off somewhere, and again, the orbit breaks. But at a particular frequency, the orbit is self-sustaining. And now that's what we've got. That is a particle. So we can now define a particle as a self-sustaining wave of the ether. Or in other words, the ether creates desire, which creates electromagnetism. High energy, high frequency electromagnetism will create a self-sustaining wave, a particle. But that particle is still just the ether. It's all made from the same thing. But now what you've got in this particle is energy stuck. It's going round and round and round. It's trying to get to the middle, but it can't. It's going round and round like a vortex, trying to get to the middle, but it can't. It wants to disappear. Remember, energy is entropic. It's trying to go back again. So the energy is trying to get to the middle, but it can't. It's stuck going round and round. The only way this energy will go back to inertia is if it's broken. So this self-sustaining wave is hit by something else. So and then the wave will break, and either it will dissipate off or it will collapse in to its own point of inertia. That's the only way the particle will break. But that particle is pretty strong. It's the magnetic field has become dominant and created a circle. It's like a little sphere. So we're going to call that particle a neutron. A neutron. Now we've got something interesting. We've got a material substance, matter, based on a self-sustaining wave of the ether, but you've still got the ether. So this ether is pure fluid energy everywhere interacting. And it's also electromagnetism. Intense interactions of the ether are electromagnetism. But now you've also got particles. Particles are very intense interactions of the ether. So intense, so fast that they loop themselves around. So now these neutrons can interact with electromagnetism and interact with the ether. Metaphysical field, consciousness. So now we've got forces. There's a force that will act upon this particle. What force? Well, it's still the same force. There's only magnetism. There's only magnetism, and that magnetism is simply the force that is created by energy because energy wants to return to inertia. It's a force created by entropy. You could actually just call it entropy. Don't call it a force, you can call it entropy. Energy is created. Entropy is the force trying to pull it back again. Remember, the ether must be balanced. It's all about balance. All these interactions are happening, but ultimately in the totality of the ether, it's pure balance. It's rest. It's inertia. Infinite balance. Infinite potential energy at rest. But inside that is turmoil, movement, things happening. So, how do these neutrons attract each other? Where's the force? Because now we've got matter and neutron. So now we know matter, there's a force called gravity acting upon matter. But remember, there's only one force. So if you're going to call it gravity, you have to also talk about magnetism. And if there's only magnetism, you have to also talk about gravity. So you can unify it this way. If you talk about gravity, you must also talk about polarized gravity, which is magnetism. Or if you talk about magnetism, then you must also talk about depolarized magnetism, which is gravity. So let me explain that to you now. Let's take first of all the neutron. So the neutron is created by this self-sustaining wave, but it's perfectly balanced. There's no charge. It's neutral. In other words, the magnetic field is dominant. The circular aspect to it is dominant. It's a perfect sphere, tiny little perfect sphere. And it's just balanced. Nothing is going to happen to it. But still, in the middle of that sphere, there is going to be the point of inertia that it's spinning around. It's bigger than, this point of inertia is infinitesimal. It's disappearing to nothing. So the atom, the neutron, is tiny, but the point of inertia is even tinier. It's infinitesimally tiny. So energy is spinning around this point, trying to disappear. Now say you've got two neutrons. They're both spinning around their own point of inertia, trying to collapse, but they can't. However, if they come close, one neutron here, the energy spinning around, will also sense the other neutron, because in the other neutron, in the middle, there's a point of inertia. So the energy spinning around one neutron will sense the point of inertia in the other one. It will think, oh, I could disappear down that one. So it gets pulled towards that one. It's trying to go down this one, but there's another one there. It's also pulled towards that one. Same with this neutron. It's trying to spin around its own point of inertia, but it will sense there's a point of inertia in that neutron. Oh, the energy around the edge is trying to also go down this one. So two neutrons will also gradually drift together. There's a gravitational force. You could call this gravity. But it's still magnetism. It's still the force created by energy trying to collapse, disappear back to inertia. But every neutron has its own point of inertia. It's trying to collapse, but there are other neutrons. So if it sees another point of inertia, it will be drawn to that. So hence, neutrons will connect to each other. There's a gravitational force. It's the same gravitational force of two inert objects. This is a big collection of atoms and neutrons and protons, all the same thing. But in the center of this lump of matter, there's a point of inertia. The gravitational force is pulling, the energy of the atoms is trying to collapse inwards towards the center. That's what a gravitational force is. It's still energy trying to disappear back to inertia. But two objects like that, this one has got its own point of inertia, this one's got its own point of inertia, but the matter, the trapped energy around it, will still sense the point of inertia in that one. It will still draw together. And of course the planet Earth is massive, a huge amount of matter there. In the middle of the planet Earth is a point of inertia. They will also be pulled towards that one. They're trying to disappear away. They want to disappear, but they can't. So even here, they get pulled together, but they're not going to disappear. That's it. That's as far as they can go. Because the magnetic field of the neutrons is so solid now. It's created a space, an illusion of mass. The neutron has created space. It holds its own space because the magnetic field has now become spherical. The magnetic aspect is dominant. Now, there's also magnetism, and magnetism is a more direct force. So how can these two be the same? Here's magnetism. Oops, it repels this way, and it attracts this way. So now we've got two forces going on. But at the side, nothing much is happening. There's a plane of inertia where nothing much is happening. But these are also two material objects. They will also have a gravitational force, but they've also got a magnetic force. Are these two forces? No, they're the same force. They're the same force, two different aspects of it. Let's look at this magnet here. In this magnet, there's a point of inertia in the middle. So that point of inertia is still the gravitational center point. There's the center of gravity is still the same point, the center of inertia. But the point of inertia here, the magnetic field is coming out. There's a field coming out. And the point of this magnet here is actually the dielectric component. The electrostatic component is dominant. In other words, the energy bursting out is more dominant. It's coming out the top and it's going in the bottom. You think of it like that. The North Pole, it's bursting out. The South Pole, it's going in. In this lump of inert matter, we've still got the point of inertia in the middle, but the dielectric component is not bursting out. It's sealed over by the magnetic field. So the dielectric component of this is hidden. The dielectric component is exposed in a magnet. Think of it like that. Here, it's still got the magnetic field, the dielectric field, this north-south pole, but it's hidden away. It's enclosed. You can't see it. It's not dominant. So there's no magnetic force to this. There still will be. There's always a slight magnetic force because it's still the same force. Gravity and magnetism are the same. But when the dielectric component is exposed, now we have a more direct force visible. Because, again, the energy is coming out of here, it wants to disappear, and the dielectric component is a straight path. It goes straight down to the middle. So here, it could just go straight in. They want to get stuck together. They're trying to disappear. This side, they can't go in because the two things are doing the same thing. You can imagine the energy is pushing out of this one, the energy is pushing out of that one. Two pushes, now to get them to, they won't go together. It takes too much energy to push them together. As I push them together, it's moving further away from inertia. So that means it can't collapse. So now we've got a repulsive force. This way, it's moving closer to inertia. So they pull together. But the South Pole, you can imagine the South Pole is being sucked inwards. So two sucking in, you would think they'd still attract, but they don't. This one is sucking in energy. This one is sucking in energy. Why don't they attract? Well, because they're both doing the same thing. They both want some energy that is coming towards them. But both of these things are doing energy, they are sucking energy away. So two sucking away is the same as two pushing away. It's hard to explain this. It only works, sucking away will only be attracted to pushing away. Two sucking away is the same problem. They're both sucking, but they're not sucking towards each other. It's like it's energy doing the same thing. Energy doing the same thing is not going to collapse. Energy doing the opposite thing, it can collapse. So North and South Pole, the North Pole will not attract, will repel, and the two South Poles will repel, but North and South Pole will attract. Energy must be doing the opposite thing for it to disappear. But in this magnet here, you can think of energy coming out and energy going in. And it's the same thing is happening here in this inert matter. Inside it, that's happening, but we can't see it because the magnetic aspect of this is dominant. So it's more like the magnetic field is holding this together. It's created this lump of matter. The magnetic field in all the atoms is sealed off. So there's the dielectric component is hidden. So it's not magnetic. And it's the same with a lump of metal. It's not magnetic, but all the atoms have got the capability of being magnetic. They're all magnetic, but they're not aligned. You would create a magnet by aligning all the atoms together such that all the dielectric components of all the atoms line up. They're all like little mini magnets. And when they all line up, there's something that happens called coherence. So all the atoms in here cohere. All the little atoms, the dipoles, line up, and then it becomes one big atom. This is like one big proton. This is like a proton. This is like a neutron. Inert matter is a neutron, and here polarized matter is a proton. But it's the same energy, just slightly different variations of it. So the neutron is a perfect circular wave. This will become a proton. It's the same particle, but the neutron is in perfect balance. Once it moves slightly out of balance, it splits a little bit into more of a donut shape. So you can think of the energy, the magnetic field, more of a donut. That means you can think of the dielectric component opening up. It opens up. Now there's a straight line towards the middle. When the magnetic field is sealed, the point of inertia in the middle, you can't get to it. It's sealed all around it by the magnetic field. You can imagine now if it opens up, like in a toroid, a donut shape, now there's a way in. There's a way in to the center of it, to the point of inertia. In the magnetic field, you've got the point of inertia in the middle. Then there's a plane of inertia horizontally around it. The plane of inertia is where the magnetic field is not operational. So here I can feel it pulling in. Here I feel it pushing out. Here it's not doing anything. So all around it, there's a plane of inertia where the magnetic field is sort of neutral. But there's also a line of inertia through the middle. There's a line of inertia that goes between the North and the South Pole, a straight line. And that takes you straight to the point of inertia in the middle. So in a magnet or in polarized matter, so a proton, you can call this polarized matter, there's a line of inertia opened up. And because of that line of inertia is a direct way in. So now it's a more powerful force. You can go straight in. In depolarized matter or inert matter, there's no way in. There's no way in to that point of inertia. It's sealed off. But it's still there. So that's why this gravitational force is softer, but they'll still pull together. Nothing will happen. And the gravitational force will still happen here. The poles of this magnet will not make much difference to this. They don't make any difference. But the point of inertia, it can still sense there's a point of inertia there. But because this is not polarized, it doesn't register the polarization of this one. But they're still the same thing. It's still the same force. Two aspects of the same force. Remember, the pure infinite ether, pure rest, infinite potential, it splits into electromagnetism. Electricity or dielectricity and magnetism is the force. These two things work together. They're one and the same thing. Electricity and magnetism are one and the same thing. And that will split into a particle. That will form a particle. But again, there's going to be two particles. One particle is the neutron, perfect balance, where the magnetic field is dominant. It's sealed itself over. But there's still a point of inertia in the middle. And the other one is the proton, where the dielectric is dominant. So the aspect of energy bursting out and going in is dominant. So now we've got a line through it. The line of inertia is open and you can go straight in. So now there's a more powerful force. But it's also, you've got a repulsion. So magnetic force has got attraction and repulsion. Gravitational force is only attraction. Very gentle attraction. So they're two different effects of the same force. That's the important thing to understand. If you want to talk about gravity, this is gravity, but then this is polarized gravity. If you want to talk about magnetism, this is magnetism, then this is depolarized magnetism. So whichever one you like. I prefer magnetism. So gravity is an effect of magnetism, another effect, and I call it depolarized magnetism. And there's another thing, there's two more forces in the universe they talk about. There's the weak nuclear force and the strong nuclear force. So there's another question about how do neutrons and protons stick together to create atoms. Well, first of all, go back to an electron. If you've got a neutron, we now know a neutron, how it's created. It's created from a high frequency disturbance in the ether, very high frequency, such that when the energy comes out, it loops back on itself. It creates its own little singularity. It's like a little singularity all by itself. Its own little universe. A neutron is its own little universe. In the middle is the point of inertia, energy spinning around. Own little universe. And it mirrors the big universe. The big universe will have the same map. And then the proton is the same thing, but with a line of inertia is opened up. So now there's a direct line in, more powerful force, a straight way to the center. In the neutron, there's not a way to the center. But how do these two things come together? Well, again, we could have gravitational drift. They might drift together. You can understand how protons might stick together. They're like little magnets. So the north pole and the south pole of two protons might stick together. And then a neutron could come in just through gravity and stick together. But there's more to it than that. Let's look at hydrogen. So hydrogen is a neutron. We now know there's a neutron. There's a neutron. A neutron would decay into a proton. So there's a proton. But a proton now has got the dielectric component. It's got a charge, something to it. So an electron has a bit more energy. A bit more energy is attracted to a proton because it's got a powerful line of inertia now opened up. It's got a charge. So electron comes in and it starts to move round. Again, it gets caught up in the orbit. So now what happens is a thing called coherence. This is how the universe works. It's coherence. Like I said, in this magnet, there's billions and trillions of little atoms, but when they all line up in the right geometry, they all become one. One atom. Quite literally, this is made up of lots of little protons, lots of atoms, but now this has become one atom due to coherence. One single atom with one single point of inertia in the middle, one single field coming out of it. So a proton will be a single particle with a point of inertia, and again a line of inertia, a charge. But when you get an electron, that comes in, adds to it, that spins around it. Now, due to coherence, this again becomes a single object. The proton and the electron cohere together into a single object. And it's the same thing, a point of inertia in the middle with energy spinning around it. But now that energy is the energy of the proton plus the energy of the electron. But the electron is not a particle. It's pure fluid energy. It's still just electromagnetism. And that is pure fluid energy because it's the ether. It's a disturbance of the ether, which is pure fluid. A highly intense disturbance of the ether is electromagnetism. But due to coherence, a hydrogen atom operates as a single unit now. It's a single object. Now if you build up more atoms, so you've got deuterium, you get another neutron in with a proton, it's still hydrogen. So once the proton and the neutron come together, so this is the question, how do they stick together? Well, now it's very interesting. At that atomic scale, again, due to coherence, when several protons or neutrons and protons get together, and again, now you need more energy to balance it, around it. It's lots of different things, but when they come together, they interlock. Due to coherence, it becomes a single object again. A larger atom will operate in the same way. A ball, energy spinning around a point of inertia. And the protons and the neutrons all link together due to coherence. It's an energy pattern. It's a frequency. So the weak nuclear force and the strong nuclear force are really an effect of coherence. At the atomic scale, when these neutrons and protons get together, they cohere in such a way, they interlock to become a single object of energy spinning around a point of inertia in the middle. And these bigger atoms, again, sometimes they can be polarized and sometimes they can be depolarized. And they can have different energy states, they call it different numbers of electrons, but a quantity of electron just means a quantity of energy. You see these atoms have got harmonics, different energy frequencies. So when a bit more energy comes up, it goes into a different harmonic. It goes down again, it goes to a different harmonic. And at these harmonics, energy is released or energy is added. So we say that's an electron gone away or an electron come in. An electron is simply a quantity of dielectricity. It's a quantity. It's not a particle, it's a particular fixed quantity. That's why we call it quantum. It's a quantity. But it's not a particle. Important distinction. There's only one particle because I'm defining it as the self-sustaining standing wave of a disturbance in the ether. A self-sustaining electromagnetic wave spinning around a point of inertia is nothing. It's still just empty space. It's energy spinning around empty space, a point of nothingness, trying to disappear. But because it can't disappear, it's created this field, it's created a space, it's self-sustaining, it's now trapped. All atoms are trapped energy, they're stuck. They're trying to dissipate, but they can't, spinning around and around forever. Again, metaphysically, that's why we feel stuck in this material world. Our souls are stuck in the body. Oh, we're trapped in this physical world. All energy is trapped energy. All this matter is trapped energy. It's trying to release, but it can't. So atoms stick together due to coherence and due to frequency harmonics. So when they get together, they cohere into another single object. So the way that the nucleuses are formed is slightly more complicated. It's again to do with energy harmonics, integration, coherence. But this is a way that we can describe and explain the universe with one force and one force only. It's a real thing. And this will explain modern science, all the experiments that they're doing. This theory can still explain them. See, I'm not denying the experiments. I'm not denying the results of the experiments. But what I'm saying is their explanation is not good enough. This is a better explanation of all the experiments they are doing. It will explain them all. It will explain the universe, the cosmos. It will explain the quantum realm, the very small. But there's no such thing as quantum in itself. Quantum is just a measurement. That's all it means. A quantity of pure fluid energy. It's not a particle. Even a so-called neutron is a particle, but it's pure fluid energy spinning around and around itself. It's still pure fluid energy, but it's a particular quantity of it to create an atom. It's going to be one particular quantity to create a neutron, but it's still pure fluid. And then an electron is another thing, but it's still pure fluid energy, a particular quantity of it required to balance against a proton. And when they get together, they cohere. And now we've got trillions of atoms, but this is all coherent. They've all cohered into this one object. So now this is again like a single atom. It's due to coherence. And in the middle of that is the center of gravity, the point of inertia. It's the same point of inertia as they got in here, but this is a point of inertia where the magnetic field comes out and you can see it. Here's the point of inertia. Magnetic field is still coming out, but you can't see it because the magnetic aspect is dominant in the substance. So there's no polarity. Depolarized matter, polarized matter. Depolarized magnetism, magnetism. Gravity or polarized gravity. That's the way we can look at it. But it's all pure fluid ether. One thing in the universe, ether, metaphysical consciousness, feelings, soul, spirit, mathematics, imagination. That creates energy through desire. Desire is still metaphysics, but the energy is turning now in the metaphysical world. The ether is moving in the feelings. That's the force. But the force intensifies, and there you can create electrostatics, a spark. A spark creates, but when a spark creates, immediately there's a force created, because where does it go? The spark goes somewhere. It's going to disappear again. So it's disappearing again due to magnetism, a force that pulls it back together. So electromagnetism is created, an intense disturbance of the ether, and that is now objective. We can all see it. And then very intense, very high frequency, a self-sustaining wave is created. Now we've got a particle that is matter. And matter is now objective reality. We can all see this. Remember, the ether is subjective, internal, desire, feelings. This is now objective. This is stuck energy. This is the ether that has crystallized. It wants to go back to pure fluid, but it can't. And these crystals, and again, this is all entropy. It all wants to collapse, gradually disintegrate into entropy and go back to rest. But I like crystals because these crystals, this is already the end of entropy. This is the most stable form of matter. All the atoms are now trapped. They're locked in here. They cannot decay any further. This is the end result of entropy. They can't do anything else now. They're locked here forevermore. The only way this would change is with some external force applied to it. I've got to heat it up or smash it. If you leave this alone, it's going to last forever like this, because the atoms can't move anymore. The energy is stuck in there. It's trapped energy. That's what matter is, stuck energy. And what is energy? Energy is a disturbance of the ether. What is the ether? Ether is metaphysical field of everything. Consciousness, feelings, mathematics. So, one ether, one energy, one force. And once that happens, there's one entropy. And to put it one more time, ether is me, consciousness. I apply my desire to create energy. And that universe does it in a primordial way. A black hole or a star is primordial consciousness, primordial desire, bursting out into electromagnetism. But once it's out there, once it's created, now it wants to go back. It's autonomous. See, these things now are autonomous. I can't do anything more to it now. It's stuck. Entropy is the autonomous movement of energy back to inertia. But the creation of energy comes from the ether, consciousness. I create it. Once it's created, all by itself, it wants to go back to inertia. But that's what life is. Life is a continuous creation of energy. In my body, I'm continually creating. The moment I stop creating energy, I die. Now the body is governed by entropy. The body will just decay. Because the consciousness has gone away, back to the ether, pure fluid metaphysics. There's no ether inside this body animating it. There's no consciousness creating desire, creating electricity in this body. So the body now becomes autonomous, it's inert matter, just governed by entropy, decays away. So this is how it works. I'm trying to explain metaphysics and physics all at once. Difficult. I hope this made sense. Please do check out the other lectures in this series and check out my homepage on my channel. I talk about this so many different ways. You've got to look through my playlists. Basically, I've organised it. You've got to click on each playlist and then look through the videos to see what interests you. You don't have to watch the whole thing, but there's so many videos about so many topics, and I come at this from so many different angles, but it's still one and the same thing. I'm always just talking about the universe as energy, chi, life force or ether, and it works in real science also. So thank you so much for listening. I hope this made sense, and I look forward to seeing you in any of these other videos here.